Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Welcome to the podcast, concerts that made us, interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down, the greatest live shows and the cheering crowd sound. It's concerts that made us, concertsthatmadeus.com.
Hello, this is John Armstrong from The Speed of Sound, and you are listening to Concerts That Made Us.
Years, the John Armstrong, you're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us.
Hello, and thank you, Brian. It's good to be here.
Thank you for being here. Now, the Speed of Sound's latest release, Mind Palace, is from the album A Cornucopia Minerva. It's an incredibly upbeat track for a track that deals with dementia and loss of identity. Take us a bit deeper into it if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want it to feel dull and depressing. And that sort of the gathering pace of forgetting things. I think that picks it up a lot better by being a much faster paced piece. I was actually on holiday in Portugal when I wrote this, and the day before we'd been to Sintra Palace, which is it's bizarre. It's like Port Merion from The Prisoner, but on top of a mountain, and it's all brightly coloured, and there's incredible different details all over the place. Wherever you're looking at it, each room looks totally different, and it just struck me that was an actual physical example of what a mind palace is, which is a sort of memory technique where you try and remember a thing by placing it in a specific place in your mind, inside a room, inside a cabinet, inside a specific drawer. And the idea is that you remember where you put it, and then you can go and find it rather than just chucking everything in the spare bedroom of your mind. So that had been ticking over, but that it just brought it all together. And yeah, it's upbeat and it's fast. I mean, it's sort of getting old is something that we all aspire to do, really, because the alternative is not getting old, and that's no good. It doesn't have to be a rubbish experience. Sadly, it is for some people, but yeah, it's just stay bright, stay with it.
I like it. I like it. Now, I mentioned the album, Cornucopia Minerva. It's part of a trilogy. This was a massive undertaking for the band, the whole project. How did the idea for it come about?
Well, again, that was really COVID had something to do with it. The plan had been to release 3 separate albums, but time just concertinaed, and it all ended up being ready at the same time. And it just didn't seem right to then spread that out over 3 or 4 years and just release them one at a time. But you can't really move forward while you're doing that. So they all ended up together, and they interact with each other quite well. The 3 different discs. Minerva is the first one, and it's got a different feel to Victory, but there's a lot of overlap with the concepts involved. I mean, as well as the dementia aspect to Mind Palace, you've got identity and self involved in that, because that kind of goes when the marbles leak out of the bag, and it's to do with individuality. And the whole 3 albums, it's about individual creativity and the way that most music never gets recorded, let alone heard. And it's the whole thing is a sort of homage to unheard music and underground culture and non-mainstream existence. Yeah. Minerva is a lot more belligerent about it. So it's sort of fist waving and angrier. Whereas Victory is no, I'm looking at this on my terms, and actually, yeah, I win. The mainstream may have all this money, but I have artistic freedom, and the very, very different aspects of how you measure what success is. Yeah, and the 3rd disc. I mean, this year, 2024, is actually the band's 35th anniversary. So we wanted to do something to mark that. There are 2 new tracks on there, which will be singles later in the year. The rest of the disc is the non-album singles that have been digital only over the last 5 years since we did the 30th anniversary special disc. and it was good to give them a physical manifestation um, as well, and a lot of the writing sort of overlapped. So although the singles were 8 of them were released a while ago, that they share aspects of Thought Train with the rest of the Cornucopia, and of course it is a huge, bulging, overflowing cornucopia of goodness. So I couldn't really call it anything else.
Very true.
Yeah. So yeah, physically it's 3 discs, vinyl, LP, and CD, and they're going up to streaming separately. So anyone who buys the early issue of the physical stuff, they get 2 exclusive extra discs of utter total quality, not sort of leftovers or the way that you'd normally do. We recorded these at the time, but they weren't good. It's intended for release when we were recording it. So yeah, they're not bonus tracks. It's a total bonus album, which will go up later for people who don't do physical music to hear. But yeah, I like LPs. Vinyl is my first choice method of playing music and listening to music. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to anyone who buys it straight away, which is good.
Yeah, yeah. I have to say you're very good to your fans. That much new stuff in one package. And when it came to recording production, was there any challenges or memorable moments you can share with us?
Yeah. The challenge was just getting it all done, really. We actually spent 30 days in the studio doing it. We could have done it in a home studio and saved a bit of money, but you just can't get the same sort of sound. And a fully mic'd up acoustic drum kit, yeah, you can't do that at home. It doesn't quite have the same ring to it. And guitars wise, it's 150 watt Vox amp head playing through a Marshall 4x12 speaker, and there's a stereo line coming out of that into another Marshall 100 watt, and they were all cranked. You can't do that at home.
No.
So yeah, it was loud. That was tremendous fun. But we learned how to save time in the studio when we were doing the previous album, Museum of Tomorrow, which is also on Big Stir Records, that came out in 2021. I knew it would work, but we hadn't actually physically tried it before. And it was basically, we record everything as live tracks along with the drums, but we only keep the drum tracks and for the final release. The rest of that, it's so you can hear everybody else playing at the same time as you while you're doing the extra layer. So it's not the same as doing it as a sort of, here's one layer of recording, here's another layer of recording. You build it up, you build it up, you build it up. You can actually hear everybody else's cues in there because you're listening to the disposable track. And that also meant that John Broadhurst on drums, he only had to come in for 5 of the sessions because we'd captured him, which then every time you add an extra person, you magnify it by 4 as the complexity of how to sort out the timings. You'll always find someone who struggles with whatever days you can arrange. So that sort of really minimized it. Then Kevin would come in and do his bass parts on top of that, but he can hear everybody else. The cues are there. You know where you are in the song, and you're still playing off what the other people have done.
Mm.
It's got a much more live feel to it than you would do if you're just doing it one dead layer at a time, where you can't really hear what everything else is. You know what it's going to sound like, but you can't hear it. And so yeah, Kevin was free after that. I did all the guitars. Anne-Marie would play second guitar if we were playing live, but it's simpler coordination wise. I did all of that. I did the keyboards in. You can't get a piano, not a grand piano. You can't get that into the studio physically. So we recorded that remotely, again, playing along to all the disposable tracks with the cues in there. And then I did that in. Bob, who actually lived across the road from me for 25 years, he's a jazz trumpeter. So we got him in to play flugelhorn and trumpet on 5 of them. And that's a new thing. We'd not used brass before. And then Anne-Marie and me came in and finished off all the vocals on top of that. But it was way, way, way more efficient than if we'd just tried. I mean, we'd still be doing it now. And we started it basically as soon as we could after the first lockdown finished. We couldn't get at rehearsals until, when would that be? Is it March 2020? Or was it 21? I don't know. I can't remember. It all just time concertinas. But until we could actually get physically into the studio, we couldn't even start rehearsals. So we had 6 months of rehearsals. Sorry, 3 months of rehearsals. 6 months of actual physical recording, and then 10 months of mixing and mastering. Wow. Which, yeah, I mean, it's not exciting stuff, mixing and mastering.
No, I wouldn't think so.
No, but yeah, we had a damn good play when we were actually in the studio as well. We knew. I mean, these pieces weren't written primarily to be played live. Lockdown was there, and I wanted to expand the way that it feels and the sound and stuff. So I knew we were adding in layers that we wouldn't be able to replicate. So we also had an awful lot of fun. We're doing video singles, 1 a month through to April next year. So there's 14 of them that I've done and prepped up. The one for July, which is out next week, I think, there's a recording layer in that where I'm playing chordal harmonics, just a repeating pattern of four different chords, but the harmonic chords are not actual ringing ones. So I did that through a wah-wah pedal, and then I should say a vintage 1970 Japanese wah-wah pedal, and then we ran that through reverse delay. And it sounds like it's come straight out of some sort of synthesizer. It's extremely bizarre. And that's just a background layer that's going throughout the coda. There's another bit where we played a mandolin and added a lot of reverse delay on that and some drenchy reverb. And there's no way that you would listen to that noise and say, oh, yes, that's a mandolin. Again, it sounds like it's a synthesizer. And acoustic guitar. Yeah, we did some wacky stuff with that as well. So there are noises in there. There's one on Victory, and it opens with this noise that sounds like it's ice crystals growing. But it's an acoustic guitar played beyond the end nut. So it's just plink, plink, plink noises. Right. But it's what we've done after that just brings it to life. A lot of the space that we did in Museum of Tomorrow with keyboards, we've used guitar effects to fill that space in a very keyboardy way. Yeah, it's absolutely tremendous fun, and that was all done at the time that we were recording it. So it's not an afterthought. It's what we'd gone in there to do. Which is kind of nice. It did the whole thing come out really exactly as I wanted it to sound when we started it. Excellent teamwork.
Sounds like a hell of a time. It's almost like when on day 30, when you walked out finished, I'd imagine you guys were sad. You wanted another 30 days in there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We did bring everybody back in for the last day. There wasn't much to do. Just I think there was one layer of backing vocals, and a bit of the shakers and tambourines left over to finish it off. But we brought everybody in and had some cake and a bit of fizz. We were all driving, so it was non-alcoholic. But that's not the point, is it?
No, it's not. It's not.
it's an adventure holiday, the whole thing. And you get art at the end of it. It's tremendous fun. It's what we like doing, basically.
Yeah, well, it definitely comes across that way anyway. Now, you guys, you have a history dating back to the day Andy Warhol died. As
Yes.
the only constant member in the band, personally, what has the journey been like for you?
Um, at times frustrating when you're thinking, why can't I find the right drummer? Because there have been sort of 19 people in the band, including myself, at present moment, and 10 of those have been drummers.
Oh man.
It's almost Spinal Tap. But I mean, none of them have died in mysterious gardening accidents, but it's as far as
Thank
I know.
God.
But yeah, it's the most difficult field to fill because there are less drummers to start with. If you are a drummer, you basically can choose whichever band you want to play in because there are less drummers, and our music isn't straightforward. It's not all 4/4. There's one on Victory that is constantly changing between 4/4 and 2/4 all the way through. I think John told me there's something like 120 time changes in it, and it's well under 2 minutes. That one, it's really short. So yeah, a lot of people would struggle with that kind of thing. But yeah, there are times when you can't play, you can't move forward because you don't have a full set of people. But I mean, it's just been absolutely tremendous to be able to create as much music as we have done. As I said earlier, most music just never gets recorded. It can't. And yeah, I feel we've achieved really an awful lot during that time.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Andy Warhol thing. That was February 1987, and the student house I was in, there were three of us who knew each other, and we were in the same house. It was a big house. I think there were about 9 people in it, and we knew we played, but we hadn't done anything about it. And yeah, we were just watching the news on the telly, and Andy Warhol's death was announced. And Steve said we should form a band. And it turned out he knew a drummer, so we did. That was called the Droogs. And yeah, it was basically garage punk. But some of the songs carry forward from that time. There's one called Earthwork and another Checkered Land, which are both on the album we put out, re-recordings, in 2016. So it carries forward from them. There's a couple that are even older. I'd written those in the very early 80s. But yeah, it's sort of that's the point that I would pinpoint and say this is the birth of the band. It being students, it sort of splintered off late in 1988, and it took about a year to get another lineup together. But yeah, we were carrying forward a lot of the same material from those days. So yeah, it's the same band. Just and just the rotation is inevitable unless you're making absolutely pots of money and not going to be able to keep the same lineup together for. I mean, most bands don't even last 3 years.
No, definitely not.
Which is why most bands don't have more than 6 songs. To be able to do so many in just one release is utterly fantastic. If you top the whole thing up, there's 38 in a Cornucopia.
Okay, you're just showing off now.
No, I'm just enjoying it. It's great to be able to do that.
Yeah.
The last album, Museum of Tomorrow, there's 13 on that, but there were a bunch of non-album singles that we put out around that time as well. So I think the sessions for that, we did 23. The album before that, which is the 2016 one, that's a single vinyl album, but it's got 2 CDs. So again, there's a bonus disc in that one. There's 20 on that. That's yeah, we might not release frequently, but when we do, There's a lot of it, and it's good.
It's definitely worth the wait anyway.
Yeah.
Oh man. And you guys, it's been said you're masters of the underground and you've always traveled kind of under the industry radar. How have you
Yeah.
managed to maintain a successful music career that spanned 4 decades?
It's all to do with how you measure success. I mean, we're not. I think we did get played on BBC Radio Ulster once. Whether that was a mistake or not, I don't know. But as far as I'm aware, that's the only time we've been on the BBC. We have been played. I didn't start counting until I think 2016, and we've just passed 450 different radio stations worldwide. There's 50 different countries in that on 6 continents. And obviously, if you broadcast from a country, it goes worldwide because radio beams just keep expanding infinitely across the universe, which is kind of nice. But yeah, it's just plugging away and not really bothering too much about what Mojo doesn't say about us. I mean, they aren't interested in us. I'm not interested in them either because they're basically just covering the same artists all the time, and most of those haven't released anything for over a decade. It's mainstream music is pretty much irrelevant to me. I'm not interested. I mean, if you are a person who, for instance, just listens to classical music, you'd have no interest whatsoever in pop. If your main interest is underground music, again, you don't need to be aware of what Warner, Sony, and Universal are doing because it doesn't matter anymore. They're not really interested in art; they're interested in product, and they have sort of production line factories that function the same way that Ford do. They're all basically typing in parameters, and that spits out beats, and they attach something else to that. It's not art. It's not interesting. And I've got a radio show myself as well. Tuning Up. It's been going for, it'll be 7 years in September. And I had 3 years on a community radio station near where I live as well before that. So it's 10 years in independent radio and basically putting shows together every week with independent music in it. There's no need to just be playing the same stuff all the time. And there's so much excellent music out there that's totally ignored, which basically comes back to the whole concept behind Minerva, which is the unheard music.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. That's something I've discovered since starting the podcast as well. There's a wealth of music out there that you normally don't even know exists. You've never heard of the band. But when you do start diving into that world and you start discovering it, it's like, I don't know, it's like heaven,
Yep. The first release that the Speed of Sound put out, we were actually under a different name then. We were called the Blood Oranges, but that name just got used and used and used by so many other people because no one really had heard us, despite being there. I changed the name to the Speed of Sound in the early 90s. Was sitting next to my amplifier, just playing away, practicing, and it was really fast rhythm and bluesy kind of piece. And I looked at the cone on the speaker and just thought, it doesn't matter how fast I'm playing, it's still moving the speaker at the same speed. Still hitting my ears at the same speed. In fact, that's a great name for a band. That's it. We'll use that instead. So yeah, that's where that came from, as an aside.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I like that. I like it. Now, the podcast is called Concerts That Made Us. So I need to ask you some concert related questions if you don't mind.
Please do.
First off, an easy one. As a concert goer, what concerts would you say have made you?
Some of those have been small venues. There was a place in Manchester called the Boardwalk, and saw PJ Harvey's first tour there in 1992, and that was great. But she was sort of unfinished as a stage performer. The music was brilliant, but she was, I mean, that's why stuff is called shoegaze, isn't it? She wasn't interacting with the audience. She was concentrating on what she was doing. And that in itself was good. But compare that with when a second album came out, wearing a bright red dress, huge lipstick, waving her arms about, no guitar, because somebody else is doing that. Total freedom. It's sort of seeing the instant change between the two, basically 18-month apart gigs. It just makes you think, wow, this was already good, but look at the transition. There's progress here. You can move along. That's there are gigs where you think, what are they doing? And I think with an apostrophe, Faith Healers. Again, that was at the Boardwalk, maybe 93. It just this is as close as we can get to feeling like you've just seen the Velvet Underground and you don't understand what it is, but you like it. So that was something that grabbed me and pulled me forward. Steve Marriott of the Small Faces, and that was Band on the Wall again in Manchester, bigger venue. It hadn't been renovated then, so it was a little bit seedy, but the voice. He stepped away from the microphone, and there didn't seem to be a drop in the volume. Incredible, absolutely incredible. Another one at Band on the Wall is Taya Rupdahl, Norwegian guitarist, ECM, German jazz label, and I saw him in '86, and he's probably is and was at the time my favourite guitarist. It's just the tone and ambient and effects that he can get out of a normal Fender Stratocaster, and not that much by way of effects. It's just his own playing. Seeing that live, that's probably the favourite gig of all time. Also because he never came back. I mean, that was the only chance I could ever have had of seeing him. So good to have been there. Didn't see The Who until 96, I think. So there's still 3 of them left alive then. But that, with John Entwistle as well, it filled out so much. He's really an irreplaceable bass player. You can get someone else to stand there, but it's just it isn't going to be the same thing. So I knew what they were going to sound like. And I knew it was going to be good, but just being there was an utter total experience. And prior to moving to Manchester in '85, I was just living not exactly in the sticks, but there just wasn't much live music where I was. Nobody came out to play there, and I didn't have any transport. And all my money I was spending on guitar strings or records, rather than late night train travel. So, that's basically why there's no dates in there before the mid '80s. That's not to say I hadn't seen any live music. It's just that there wasn't an awful lot of it. My dad played in a live folk band, traditional English folk, for decades. So I'd seen him and whoever had been on at the same time as him frequently, but just not quite the same exposure.
It's a great selection. I'm hugely jealous that you've seen The Who. Were they as good in '96 as you would imagine they were back in the '60s? Had they lost anything over time, do you think, by then?
I don't think they had on the night that I saw them. I mean, I've seen them, I think 4 times in total, but that was the first one. And the last time I went, Doctory's voice wasn't quite there. I think they dropped the key on a couple of them, so I didn't have to sing quite so high. But yes, I would say that they were still as good. I mean, it was Zach Starkey who was drumming, sitting in on the drum stool on that stage, Ringo's son. And basically his drum tutors from birth were Ringo and Keith Moon. He's possibly better than Keith because he kept time. So Pete didn't have to stand sideways on to his amplifier and make himself deaf in one ear, so that he could see what Keith was doing, and Keith could see whether his guitar's up or down for the downbeat and try and get back in if he was off. It was brilliant. And that was when they revised Quadrophenia. The first time they played it since. Well, they didn't really. They couldn't. They tried when they were touring in '73, and the equipment and the technology, it wasn't possible to do what they were trying to do. And by '74, if you sort of look at set lists or live video from them, they dumped most of it because they just couldn't do it live. Which isn't a surprise because it's one guitar, one bass, and drums. And the advance on that between Live at Leeds, which is a brilliant live album, it takes sort of 3-piece music as far as you can go, really. But yeah, you've got to change if you want to do something else, and they certainly did, but it couldn't be done. They'd do it in the studio, but they couldn't do it live.
Yeah, I had to wait for time to catch up with them.
Yes, and it did. And it was that was good. It was just excellent to be able to see them again because I didn't think it would happen. I mean, they had put out Who's Last album with Kenny Jones, so that would have been 83-ish, and that they were not going to do anything else after that. And then they did tour in '89 as a boxed set for that. But yeah, I just didn't expect them to do it, and they did. Yes, please, we say. I can't actually remember what the first gig was that I saw when I came into Manchester. There were two that were very close together. So it was either Here and Now, who were playing at UMist, or Doctor and the Medics at Manchester Poly.
Right. What was the last gig you were at then?
That will have been the Chords UK, which was in Blackpool, December. So it's a few months. But I've been busy since then. It's the trouble with putting out an album. It does absorb an awful lot of time. True. But yeah, it's basically Chris Pope from The Chords, who were 79 through to 82, and he's regenerated with new lineup and put out a whole bunch of new material. I think 3 albums so far, and they're still playing the stuff from 1980 as well. It's superb performances, and The Chords plus the Small Faces are the two things that made me think I'd quite like to play guitar. It wasn't that I wanted to sound exactly like them, but they made it look fun, and it felt like something that would be interesting to do, and it was. I highly recommend anyone who hasn't done it to just get out and start.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, your own gigs. I've heard it said that if 2 people went to the same show, they would walk away feeling like they've seen and heard 2 completely different shows. So for any listeners that haven't caught one of your shows, what are they like? Give us the full experience if you can.
Well, I mean, for one thing, we play very few covers. We'll frequently chuck one in, but there's the main thrust is we're playing our music because that's what we're best at. Even when we do play a cover, it still sounds like us. And it would take people a long time to realize, oh, I have heard this before. Yeah, yes. I mean, there was a small festival we were playing in Lancashire, and yeah, we played the set. We got off, and yeah, two people came up to us afterwards, and one of them said, "You sound like the Stranglers," and the other one said, "You're like Jefferson Airplane," and it's just not possible to be both of those at the same
No.
time. It's, but I think it does kind of get across a sense of what we actually feel like musically. There's a sort of layer of floating harmonies, and there's a layer of crunch underneath it. And yeah, it was a couple of days before I'd worked out that yeah, you can have both of those at the same time, but not in the same layer. You need to be listening to them separately to be able to pick it out. Yeah, a sort of floating crunch.
It's a good description.
Probably, yeah. Power jangle is another way of looking at it, but it's sort of, again, it's just the default setting. Yeah, there's one particular track which is probably the one that we've played more often than any others, which actually dates back to 1984, and yeah, that's the one that has the most Paisley incense influences in it, I think. But yeah, we have never actually played the same set twice. We'll always move something around. Only we've got a big enough catalogue to be able to pick from, but also just inserting a cover that we haven't done before just breaks it up. I think it's important to keep everything that you're doing fresh.
Absolutely.
Which is it's another plus of having had 19 people in the band. Every time it changes, something shifts.
Yeah.
And you've got a new area to explore. And yeah, it's the exploration is what it's about for me.
Yeah, keep it exciting.
Improvisation where possible within set parameters.
Exactly. And if you think of all the gigs you've played over your career, is there one that sits above the rest? You know, it just couldn't have got any better.
I mean, we have played a lot of gigs. I think for fun and just total experience, probably doing an hour and a half set in Germany. Yeah, that was terrific. We'd gone over there specifically for the gig, played and came back again the next day. But sort of gigs for independent bands in the UK, you sort of get 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. And it still takes you all day to do that. And you've got minimum sound check. When we put on gigs ourselves, we sort of try and aim for us having an hour and whoever we're on with having an hour. It's you've got enough time to actually show a range of what you do rather than play the same 6 or 7 songs that you probably play every time you play. It's just half an hour isn't long enough. And the minimum sound check thing is because we've got dual vocals. By the time the sound engineer, if they're not familiar with us, has worked out who's actually on lead vocal on this one, we can be halfway through it. And yeah, just the sound on that one felt pretty damn good as well. Yeah, there was one at the Roadhouse in Manchester, which, like most venues, has closed down since. But that yeah, the sound just really came together on that one. Again, you're listening to the monitors. So what we get isn't necessarily what's the same out there. But that was one of the clearest sounding to me. And Ruby Lounge in Manchester, again, we played there a couple of times, maybe three. And yeah, sound and that just felt excellent. And when you've got clarity on that, it's easier to pour more in, basically, experience-wise. Yeah, but we've played with an awful lot of people that, again, I mean, most people haven't heard of us, so they probably haven't heard of the people that we're playing with, but it was other independent bands. A lot of them hadn't played Manchester before. Some of them hadn't even played in the UK before. And it was sort of acting a bit like a hub. It was just, this is independent music. You should go and listen to it. We did a series of gigs at the King's Arms it's just over the river. It's in Salford. Great venue. And yeah, it's for a year and a half, we put on a monthly gig there with a different gig partner each time round. Great experience.
Yeah, I'd say so. If we take that question and flip it around, then is there a gig you would consider the worst? Everything went wrong, and how did you overcome it?
One of the gigs at the King's Arms, we got there and were setting up, and we found out there was no sound engineer and the PA hadn't been put together, which is fairly critical.
Yeah.
We don't have roadies because we can't pay them. So, I mean, as an independent band, you do everything and all, you're lugging around yourself. But one of our friends had experience of sound engineering. Not much, but he had some. And he turned up early and was able to work out where most of the wires were supposed to go and could set the levels, which you can't do if you're playing yourself, really. I know people have iPads and stuff and they're sliding it around, but you can't do that while you're playing the guitar. And yeah, we sort of managed to come out of that one okay. But it does fry your brain a little bit when you find out that sort of circumstances. The German one I mentioned, that was a great gig, but coming back, we almost got taken to the wrong airport.
Right.
Which is terrific. It was in Hilden, which is, I know now, mid-distance between Dusseldorf and Bonn. And we'd flown into Bonn, and the taxi was taking us to Dusseldorf.
Oh, man.
I just spotted it on the sign above the lane change on the Autobahn. And fortunately, the taxi driver knew enough English. I could get his attention in German, but I couldn't quite. Yeah. And yeah, at 3:20 in the morning, that really isn't what you want, but it does add to the sense of adventure, shall we say.
Very true, when you look at it like that.
And it worked out fine.
Well, that's the main thing. That is the main thing. Now, before we dive into the last couple of questions, future plans. We've heard about the album, the trilogy, the singles. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us? Any gigs on the horizon or anything like that?
No, we're still not gigging at the moment. We haven't actually played live since before the lockdown. Releasing this much stuff takes so much energy, and playing gigs also takes so much energy and time, and I just don't think it's possible to do both properly. Before the lockdown, I'd spent 6 months putting together some gigs over in California, and it was a bit like having the rug pulled out from under your feet while you're running. Just when we can't actually do that. I could have spent something else with that time. I could have achieved something else rather than just planning something that didn't happen. And it's taken quite a while to reset the brain after that. And then so deep in the recording and the mixing and the mastering and putting the video together, and now in the release cycle, because the Victory album goes up to streaming at the end of September, and Bounty, the third disc, will be following it in November. We've still got video singles going through till April. I think it's going to be into next year before I can start thinking about what the next phase is and what we do. And sonically, we've covered so much ground in Cornucopia. I need to work out where to go next. It's sort of possibly a point that Who were with the Live at Leeds album. You think, can I take this further in this direction? Where do we go? What do we do next? So yeah, you need a bit of mental space to work out what we actually do. But yeah, it's not the end. It's not a full stop. There will be more, quite definitely.
Thank God for that. You know, I was just thinking when you were saying, where do we go next? I'm glad that's a problem you have and not I have, because that seems like a very hard puzzle to solve.
Well, yeah, for about a year, I'd be tinkering away on the guitar and thinking, oh, yes, this is nice. I like this new tune. It's not new. It's insert name in a different key. Or it's insert name, but that third chord's different. And that was pretty frustrating as well. But that started to wear off. So there are things in there below the surface that just haven't germinated yet. We need more lawn feed, but it's going to come up.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Now, the last couple of questions, there are a couple of random fun ones, but I'm intrigued to see your answers. Now, besides music, although we've heard you've got no time for anything else, but besides music, what are you currently obsessed with?
Well, that also covers the radio show as well, doesn't it? So, aside from that, gosh, I kind of like cricket. It's the only sport that I have any interest in whatsoever. I'm totally immune to football, so I believe there was some football quite recently, but I'm immune to that. It doesn't bother me. Cricket I do quite like, and I'm obsessed with ranting that there's a county championship, which is the best competition in domestic cricket, and they refuse to play it in the summer. There's a gap where they do the one-day games, so they can have day-night matches with fireworks when it's not dark and you can't see the fireworks because it's summer. And when the weather, I mean, okay, this year's exceptional, but when the weather is supposed to be best, they play the kind of cricket that you could play in a bit of damp. And the county championship is just stuck mostly in April and September. And yeah, so I'm obsessed with ranting about that, but I'll spare you from that.
Right. Okay. The next question, it's a bit of an odd one. If you had to spend 24 hours locked in a room with any musician from history, who would it be?
Oh dear. Now that is difficult. Someone who's unlikely to beat you up is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
You'd not get much sense out of Beethoven because you'd not be able to hear you, although that would be good if you could. I don't know. Can I pick one of my mates? I don't know. I really don't know. Who would I learn the most from? There's another one. Go on. Let's go with Joni Mitchell, because I think she'd be good fun, and she does all those tunings that I just haven't really experimented with. I use a lot of open drone strings and chord shapes that other people tend to avoid, but I've not experimented with tunings. I could probably learn a lot from her in 24 hours. Let's go with Joni.
I like it. Good choice. Good choice. And the final one. What's your go-to album? What's an album you constantly revisit?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of them. But to pick just one is very, very, very difficult. Um, I'm going to go with the Chords album from 1980, which is just called The Chords. That's so far away, actually, isn't it? Yeah, so far away. It's just so energetic. It's boisterous and got so much zing to it. It does pick you up a bit, despite the content being a bit gloomy, which is, it's a good thing. Gloominess done vigorously is a good combination. Let's have that.
Very true. Great choice. John, listen, this has been an absolutely fascinating chat. Thanks a million.
Thanks very much, Brian. Terrific stuff. Enjoyed it.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. And if you're interested in signing up to Band Builder Academy, use the link in the show notes below and enter the code CONCERTS and you'll receive 10% off. So, until next time, keep rocking.
Hey, what are you guys still doing here? The show's over. It's over. You can go home. Go on. We'll see you next time. We'll be here. Bye.